Hey guys, hope this video finds you well. This is one of our last note-taking videos we're going to be going over. We're going to finish up pre-World War I America. I'm going to do a video on how World War I kind of gets started, and then you will have graduated at this point. So just know that we're kind of moving into territory that you will see in, depends on what school you go to, but when you take a world history class, which is likely going to be either your freshman or sophomore year of high school, you're going to start seeing a lot of this stuff on World War I in the later part of that year. So this is stuff that you're going to see again in a year or two, so it's good to learn it now. So you might have heard the political term progressive before. It has a different connotation in American history than it has as like a political term now. But it basically means someone who wants to fundamentally change society, okay? So whether that's in politics, whether that's just in your average life, a progressive thinks that things need to change. This is opposed to as like a conservative who would want things to stay the same. Now, typically, we would associate in America in the year 2020 progressivism with being a liberal or being on the left wing. This is not necessarily true. 100 years ago, when the progressives are coming around, you had progressive Republicans and progressive Democrats. It wasn't really a party thing necessarily. So this is late 1800s into like the first 20 years, up into the roaring 20s or so. And the progressive presidents, there's like 4 or 5 of them in a row. And again, they're from different parties. And you're going to see a lot of different movements in America change, okay? A lot of this stems from an event called the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. So you see a lot of restrictions start to be placed on business. The Triangle Shirtwaist Fire is, if I'm remembering it correctly, it's like this incident where there was like this factory, I think it was like a clothing factory, and they used to lock the doors of the factory so that the workers couldn't take bathroom breaks, and a fire broke out. And a bunch of people burned to death because the owners had locked the doors and wouldn't let them out. And so after this, there's like an outcry to like really change how business and stuff works in America. So there's these group of people, they're known as muckrakers. So some of the famous writers you'll read about, like guys like Upton Sinclair, you'll read their stuff in high school probably if you take like AP courses. They were muckrakers of like the early 1900s. And these are guys who try to expose the ills and evils of society. So I might have to restart Keynote. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, so Lord Almighty, I don't know what's wrong with this. Let's try one more time. And by the way, I'm not editing this because, why would I edit it? Here we go. Okay, great. So one of the big things they try to change is child labor. Kids your age used to just, work 60-hour weeks, like in coal mines and factories and stuff, and that was just considered normal. So they try to change some stuff like this, and you might say, well, my parents make me work on the weekends. Okay, great. Well, if it's family-owned business, rules are different, so stop complaining. If your parents are forcing you to work in one of those Jacksonville coal mines, you might have a good argument to take to the state of Florida. The meatpacking industry is a big industry that gets changed during this time, and a lot of this is due to this famous book by the guy I mentioned, Upton Sinclair, called The Jungle. Normally, I would read you guys excerpts of this. I encourage you, if you have a strong stomach, to read them out yourself. The stories of the meatpacking industry during this time are some of the nastiest, most disgusting stuff. Like the list of things that go into like sausage and ground beef back then is just the grossest. I will say rat feces and rat carcasses that were commonly just in them. Not the grossest stuff that went into people's food back then. All right, it is absolutely disturbing. And this book, The Jungle, was like a whole expose on that kind of stuff. And they're going to try to get rid of a lot of political corruption too. Soon after the Civil War, America had lots and lots of political corruption issues during the presidency of Ulysses S. Grant. That's going to continue. And a lot of journalists are going to try to put a stop to that. If you're like, well, I thought we still had political corruption in 2020, you're correct. They fail. Now, you've probably heard Progressivism, as I said, I just want to go over a couple of the famous progressive movements back then. There are, within wanting to change society, different specific ways people want to change society, okay? One of the main ones we probably all know is feminism, okay? And some of you are like, yay, feminism, and some of you are like, boo, feminism. Feminism 100 years ago has, again, as a lot of terms do, kind of a different meaning than it does today. It's women, you cannot argue that women were treated equally 100 years ago to men, or 120 years ago. You can't make that argument because it's not true. Women weren't allowed to vote. Women were very restricted educationally and vocationally, and women didn't make as much money either. So this is basically their movement to give women's rights. Now, if you want to have the argument about are men and women equal now, you could probably make a good argument on that now, but you really can't argue that 100 years ago, okay? Again, you're going to see a huge beginning of influence of women in American politics, and this is before they have the right to vote. Women will receive the right to vote in the year 1920, but they are causing a lot of political movements even before they have the right to vote, which is pretty crazy. Socialism is another one, and this is one which I'm shocked to say is making a comeback in the year 2020, but socialism, you're going to see big movements in the early 1900s in a lot of countries around the world, but definitely in America. And this is the idea that the workers should own means of production as opposed to the owners, and people, there shouldn't really be social classes. Everyone should just be completely equal and all that stuff. Another one is prohibition, and it starts with the temperance movement throughout the 1800s, and if you probably already know what this is, but if you don't, it's basically stop drinking alcohol. And unfortunately, we will not be able to get to Prohibition America. I highly encourage you to research it. It is fascinating. It's basically in the 1920s, the sale of alcohol was banned in America, and it's there's so many just like memeable moments from it. It's just incredible. It's stuff like grape juice companies used to like print the directions to turning grape juice into wine on their labels, and then at the bottom, like in small print, they would say, "But totally don't do this." It's just, there's so much funny stuff that goes with that era. Unfortunately, we can't do it, but just know that alcohol sale will be prohibited for a full decade in America. Now, does that stop people from drinking? No, because America's full of a bunch of drunks, but it does happen for about a 10-year period. So I want to get into, just very quickly, one of my favorite American presidents, a fascinating person. Yes, this is Teddy Roosevelt, and yes, this is him fighting Bigfoot, okay? Did it actually happen? Possibly. Let's talk about Teddy real quick. Okay, so Teddy, one of the most fascinating people in American history. He was the vice president under William McKinley, who was the president at the turn of the century. He was a famous war hero from the Spanish-American War. All right, he was the leader of a group of people that were known as the Rough Riders. This was like his own personal detachment of troops that he took to Cuba to go fight the Spanish. He was actually like one of the secretaries of the Navy, and he resigned his post to go fight in the war. So after the war, he becomes famous. McKinley says, "Hey, do you want to be my VP for my second term?" He says, "Sure." And right after that starts, McKinley is actually going to be assassinated, and Teddy takes over. Teddy is the youngest president in U.S. history. A lot of people say it's JFK. I believe JFK is the youngest elected, but Teddy became president when he was, I think, 41, which is old to you, but it's actually really young. All right, so just one or two quick things on Teddy. He is the first of the progressive presidents, as we would call them. He is a Republican. All right, he is not. There are some presidents who are kind of laissez-faire. They kind of just say, "Hey, you guys do what you're going to do. I'll protect basic rights." Teddy was not. Teddy was an authoritative president. All right, he was influential at home, and he was extremely influential with foreign affairs. All right, Teddy came up with this idea called the square deal. This is where, back then you said if someone was square, it would be like, oh, they're trustworthy and everything. And later on it becomes, oh, he's a square. It means like he's a nerd or he's a loser. But at the time, the square deal was about, trust between businesses and stuff. And his basic premise was, if you are a good business who's honest to people, we will reward you. If you are bad and take advantage of people, we will punish you. All right. He goes after a lot of these major big businesses. We learned about a lot of monopolies last year. He gets the nickname the Trust Buster because he breaks up a lot of monopolies and a lot of powerful businesses. He is a famous hunter and outdoorsman and conservationist, and he goes all around the world on big game hunting trips, and he is he starts the national park system in America. He was probably the first environmentalist president, and he was the biggest environmentalist president we've ever had. And you're like, I thought you said he was a hunter. Hunters are often environmentalists and conservationists. I'm also pretty sure that Teddy Bear is named after him, but I could be wrong on that. All right, so Teddy, very influential foreign policy, and he had like a fake African proverb. I don't think it's real, but he used to say, oh, it's the old African proverb. All right, speak softly and carry a big stick, which is essentially, it's like if you walk down a dark alley and but you have like a gun on your hip, like you're not causing trouble, but you will finish the trouble if someone comes after you. Okay, so what he's basically saying is that America is not going to start problems, but we will sure finish them. He's an interventionalist. If he thought that you were messing with one of the Latin American countries, he had no problem with threatening to go after you. He does not want European nations involved in our side of the world, which we are getting to the time where, although they might have some involvement, this is the 1900s and into the 21st century. You see less European involvement over here than it has been for the previous 4 centuries. All right? Now, although Teddy didn't want other nations to get involved in Latin America, he had no problem at all getting involved in Latin American issues and stuff, and we did that stuff quite often. Teddy's a fascinating guy, had a fascinating presidency. If you're asking me, would I consider him one of the best presidents? I personally would. He is continually normally ranked in the top 5, top 10 presidents we've had. He's a very effective leader. He won the Nobel Peace Prize by negotiating the end of the war between the Russians and the Japanese in 1905. Very interesting guy. And I haven't even gone over all his stuff. Really, really, really encourage you to go research some more stuff on him, and I will hopefully get you some more stuff in the next video, but I don't really want to give you like a 30-minute video. So that'll be it. I'll see you guys later. Have a good one.